The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Ghost 7, this is Viper 6. We are weapons dry in RTB. Good luck down there. The transmission ended with the finality of a coffin closing. Below in the valley, 12 Navy SEALs pressed against jagged rocks, their night vision painting the world in ghostly green. Taliban fighters had them surrounded on 3 sides, muzzle flashes sparking like deadly fireflies in the darkness. Lieutenant Commander Jake Reaper Morrison keyed his radio with trembling fingers. Blood seeped through his tactical vest where shrapnel had found its mark 20 minutes earlier. Any station, this is Bravo 27. We are danger close and need immediate air support. How copy? Only static answered. The Apache gunships had already burned through their ammunition on the convoy ambush 5 clicks north. The A-10 Warthogs were grounded for maintenance. Even the drones were committed elsewhere along the border. In the Tactical Operations Center back at Forward Operating Base Shank, Colonel Marcus Webb stared at the digital display showing Bravo 27's position. Red dots blinked ominously around their location, estimated enemy positions multiplying by the minute. "Sir," his communications officer reported, voice tight with professional restraint, "all available air assets are either RTB or engaged elsewhere. We've got nothing to send them." Webb's jaw clenched. 12 of America's finest warriors were about to die in a forgotten valley in Afghanistan, and he was powerless to stop it. The tactical situation was textbook hopeless. The SEALs had walked into a carefully orchestrated trap during their high-value target mission. Now they were paying the price for intelligence that had been deliberately fed to them by a double agent they'd trusted for months. The silence in the TOC was deafening, broken only by the hum of servers and the distant thrum of generators. Outside, the first hints of dawn were bleeding across the eastern sky, which meant the enemy would soon have visual confirmation of the SEALs' exact positions. Night had been their only ally, and it was slipping away with each passing second. Morrison's voice came through the radio again, calmer now but carrying the weight of a man who knew he was about to die. "Bravo 27 to any listening station. We are surrounded and taking heavy fire. If anyone is out there, we could really use some help." The transmission ended and the radio fell silent once more. In that moment of absolute despair, when hope had been reduced to nothing more than electromagnetic static, something impossible happened. A new voice cut through the darkness, calm and steady and utterly unexpected. "Bravo 27, this is Ghost 33. I'm 5 minutes out and carrying a full load. Keep your heads down, gentlemen. Cavalry's coming." The radio transmission was so unexpected that Morrison actually looked at his handset to make sure it was working properly. Ghost 33 wasn't on any flight roster he'd seen. According to the Tactical Operations Center, there were no available air assets within 50 nautical miles of their position. Yet someone was out there, claiming to have a full weapons load and closing fast on their location. Webb grabbed his headset in the operations center, his face a mask of confusion and desperate hope. "Ghost 33, this is Overwatch. Authenticate your call sign and mission authority." The response came back immediately, professional and unflappable. "Overwatch, Ghost 33. Authentication Bravo Whiskey 79er. Mission authority is still breathing Americans who need help." The authentication code was valid, but that was impossible. Webb's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up aircraft assignments and mission logs. Every Apache helicopter in the theater was accounted for, either on the ground or engaged in other operations. Ghost 33 simply didn't exist according to his records. In the valley, Morrison heard the distinctive whop-whop-whop of rotor blades echoing off the canyon walls. The sound was growing stronger, closer, and it carried with it the most beautiful promise in the world: salvation. The enemy fighters had heard it too, their muzzle flashes shifting position as they tried to identify the source of the approaching aircraft. Through his night vision, Morrison caught his first glimpse of the Apache as it crested the ridgeline like some mechanical angel of death. The aircraft was flying low and fast, its profile unmistakable even in the green-tinted darkness. Whoever was piloting Ghost 33 knew exactly what they were doing, using the terrain to mask their approach until the last possible second. The Apache's chin-mounted 30mm cannon swiveled with predatory precision as the aircraft swept into the valley. Red laser designators painted the night, marking targets with scientific accuracy. The pilot's voice came over the radio again, and this time Morrison caught something in the tone that surprised him. It was a woman's voice, steady and confident and completely in control. Bravo 27, Ghost 33 has eyes on multiple hostiles surrounding your position. I count at least 30 fighters in prepared positions. Recommend you mark your position with strobes and get as low as possible. This is going to get loud. Morrison fumbled for his strobe light, his mind racing. A female Apache pilot in an aircraft that shouldn't exist, appearing from nowhere to save their lives. In 17 years of military service, he'd seen plenty of impossible things become routine, but this felt different. This felt like a ghost story in the making. The Apache settled into a hover 200 feet above the valley floor, its rotors beating the air with mechanical thunder. The chin gun moved with lethal purpose, and Morrison could see the pilot through the aircraft's canopy, her helmet silhouetted against the pale green glow of her instruments. She was hunting, and every Taliban fighter in the valley had just become prey. The first burst from the 30mm cannon lit up the night like lightning, tracers streaking toward enemy positions with devastating accuracy. The sound was like the world ending, a deep, rolling thunder that shook rocks loose from the canyon walls and set Morrison's teeth on edge. Hydra rockets followed seconds later, their orange trails painting geometric patterns across his night vision before impacting in brilliant white flashes. Ghost 33 moved with fluid precision, never staying in one position long enough to become a target. The pilot was dancing the Apache through the air, using every fold and shadow in the terrain to maintain tactical advantage. It was the most beautiful display of combat flying Morrison had ever witnessed, and he'd seen plenty of good pilots in his time. The enemy return fire was intense but ineffective. Muzzle flashes sparked from dozens of positions, tracer rounds reaching up toward the Apache like grasping fingers. But the pilot seemed to anticipate every shot, sliding the aircraft left or right with casual ease that made the whole thing look like a deadly ballet. Ghost 33, you've got multiple SAMs tracking from the northern ridgeline, Morrison called out, spotting the telltale infrared signatures through his night vision. Surface-to-air missiles were the Apache's greatest threat, and the Taliban had learned to position them carefully in these mountain operations. The pilot's response was immediate and surprising. Instead of pulling back to a safer distance, she pushed the Apache forward, diving toward the valley floor at an angle that seemed to defy physics. Copy that, Bravo 27. Let's go introduce ourselves to those SAM sites. What happened next would be talked about in military circles for years to come. Instead of engaging the missile sites from standoff range, Ghost 33 flew directly at them, using the Apache's speed and the pilot's intimate knowledge of the terrain to thread the needle between prepared positions. The chin gun spoke again, longer bursts this time, systematically dismantling the SAM sites with surgical precision. One by one, the enemy positions fell silent. The Apache climbed back to altitude, its job complete with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. In less than 10 minutes, Ghost 33 had turned a hopeless tactical situation into a clean sweep, neutralizing over 30 enemy combatants without taking a single hit. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the Apache's rotors and the distant sound of secondary explosions as ammunition stores cooked off. Morrison keyed his radio with hands that were no longer shaking. Ghost 33, Bravo 27. Outstanding work up there. We owe you our lives. The response came back with a hint of something that might have been humor. Just doing my job, Bravo 27. Stay safe down there. The Apache banked away from the valley, disappearing over the ridgeline as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind nothing but questions and a dozen very grateful Navy SEALs. Back at the Tactical Operations Center, Colonel Webb was staring at his screens with the expression of a man who just witnessed a miracle. The aircraft identification transponder for Ghost 33 had vanished from his displays the moment the Apache cleared the ridgeline. According to his computers, the aircraft had never existed at all. His communications officer was frantically working his keyboard, trying to trace the radio transmissions and flight path data. "Sir, I can't find any record of Ghost 33 in our systems. No flight plan, no mission authorization, no maintenance logs. It's like that aircraft is completely off the books." Webb rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache that had nothing to do with the early hour. In 30 years of military service, he'd never encountered anything like this. Aircraft didn't just appear from nowhere, especially not Apache gunships with full weapons loads and pilots skilled enough to single-handedly destroy a Taliban stronghold. The mystery deepened when Webb tried to contact the other forward operating bases in the region. Nobody had launched an Apache that night. Nobody had any record of Ghost 33. The aircraft had appeared, saved 12 American lives, and vanished back into the darkness like something out of a legend. Over the next several hours, as Bravo 27 extracted safely to their base and filed their after-action reports, the story of Ghost 33 began to spread through the military grapevine with the speed of wildfire. 12 SEALs swore they'd been saved by a female Apache pilot who'd appeared from nowhere. The Tactical Operations Center had radio recordings and radar tracks that proved the aircraft's existence. But officially, Ghost 33 didn't exist at all. The first person to solve the puzzle was Chief Warrant Officer Martinez in the maintenance section at Bagram Airfield. He was reviewing overnight flight logs when he noticed something odd in the helicopter assignment roster. Apache serial number 405298 was listed as down for maintenance major overhaul in the official records. But Martinez knew that particular aircraft intimately, and he was certain he'd seen it on the flight line that morning. A quick walk to the maintenance hangar confirmed his suspicions. Apache 405298 was sitting in its assigned spot, freshly washed and showing clear signs of recent flight operations. The engines were still warm, and there were empty weapon pylons where Hydra rockets should have been mounted. Someone had taken this aircraft out for an unauthorized combat mission. Martinez pulled the maintenance logs for 405298 and discovered something even more interesting. The aircraft had been assigned to Chief Warrant Officer Elena Ghost Vasquez for the past 8 months, but Vasquez had been grounded pending investigation after an incident involving unauthorized flight operations 3 weeks earlier. According to the personnel records, she wasn't even supposed to be on base that night. The investigation that followed would uncover one of the most remarkable stories in modern military aviation. Elena Vasquez had joined the Army 12 years earlier, fresh out of high school in a small Texas border town. She'd excelled in flight training, earning her wings and call sign through a combination of natural talent and relentless determination that impressed even the most cynical instructors. The call sign Ghost had originated during her advanced training at Fort Rucker. Vasquez had a habit of appearing in the training area before anyone expected her, completing complex exercises with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. Her instructors joked that she could make an Apache helicopter invisible, and the nickname stuck. But Elena Vasquez was more than just an exceptionally skilled pilot. She was also a woman trying to succeed in a field that still hadn't fully accepted female combat aviators. The skepticism had been constant throughout her career, from training instructors who questioned whether women belonged in gunships to fellow pilots who assumed she'd gotten her position through some form of affirmative action rather than merit. The breaking point had come 3 weeks earlier during a routine training mission. Vasquez had been flying with a co-pilot fresh from flight school, a young man named Bradley who'd made it clear from day one that he didn't think women should be in combat aircraft. Their personality clash had finally boiled over during what should have been a simple gunnery exercise. Bradley had questioned one of Vasquez's tactical decisions over the intercom, his tone dripping with condescension. "Are you sure about that approach, Ghost? Maybe we should try something a little more traditional." The implication was clear. Maybe they should try something more masculine, more conventional, more suited to what he considered proper military aviation. Vasquez's response had been swift and definitive. She put the Apache through a series of maneuvers that demonstrated exactly why she'd earned her reputation as one of the best combat pilots in the theater. High-speed terrain following, precision gunnery, tactical formations that required split-second timing and absolute confidence in one's abilities. By the time she was finished, Bradley was silent and slightly green around the gills. The problem came when they returned to base. Bradley had filed a complaint alleging that Vasquez had engaged in reckless flying and endangered their aircraft. The investigation that followed had been thorough and ultimately inconclusive, but it had been enough to ground Vasquez pending final resolution. For 3 weeks, one of the Army's most skilled combat pilots had been sitting on the sidelines, while her fellow aviators flew missions without her. On the night that Bravo 27 found themselves surrounded and abandoned, Alina Vasquez had been in the operations center pulling duty as a watch officer. She'd heard the desperate radio calls and watched the tactical display as 12 American lives hung in the balance. She'd seen Colonel Webb's frustration as he realized there were no available assets to send to their aid. In that moment, faced with the prospect of watching good soldiers die while she sat safely behind a desk, Alina Vasquez made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She quietly slipped out of the operations center and made her way to the flight line, where Apache 405298 was waiting in the darkness. The pre-flight inspection had been completed in record time, muscle memory guiding her hands through the familiar checklist even as her mind focused on the tactical situation developing 50 miles away. The weapons load had been already configured for a training mission that had been canceled due to weather, giving her a full complement of Hydra rockets and 30 cannon ammunition. Taking off without authorization was a court-martial offense. Flying a combat mission while officially grounded was career suicide. But Alina Vasquez had joined the military to serve her country and protect American lives, not to sit on the sidelines while bureaucrats debated her fitness for duty. If saving 12 SEALs meant ending her career, she was prepared to make that sacrifice. The flight to the valley had taken 18 minutes, every second of which Vasquez used to study the tactical situation and plan her attack. The radio intercepts gave her a clear picture of enemy positions and friendly locations. Her intimate knowledge of the terrain, gained through months of flying missions in this sector, allowed her to plot an approach route that would maximize surprise and minimize her exposure to enemy fire. What the official reports would never capture was the emotional weight of that flight. Alina Vasquez wasn't just flying a combat mission. She was flying to prove that she belonged in that cockpit, that her skills were every bit as valuable as those of her male counterparts, that grounding her had been a mistake that nearly cost 12 lives. The engagement itself had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it represented the culmination of everything Alina Vasquez had trained for during her 12 years of military service. Every hour in the simulator, every tactical exercise, every moment of doubt and determination had led to this single mission, where her skills made the difference between life and death for 12 American warriors. When she returned to base and parked the Apache in its assigned spot, Vasquez knew that her military career was effectively over. Unauthorized use of military aircraft was a serious offense, and no amount of heroism could completely erase that fact. But as she walked away from the aircraft, she also knew that she'd done exactly what she'd sworn an oath to do: protect and defend American lives, regardless of personal cost. The investigation into Ghost 33's identity had taken less than 48 hours. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez's maintenance logs provided the initial lead, and security footage from the flight line confirmed that Elena Vasquez had taken the aircraft without authorization. By the time Colonel Webb called her into his office, everyone involved knew exactly what had happened. Webb had prepared for the meeting by reviewing Vasquez's entire service record. 12 years of exemplary service, commendations for valor, efficiency reports that consistently ranked her in the top 5% of combat aviators. The incident report that had led to her grounding looked increasingly trivial when compared to the magnitude of what she'd accomplished during her unauthorized mission. The conversation that followed would become legendary among the officer corps at Forward Operating Base Shank. Webb had opened with the standard recitation of charges and regulations that had been violated. Vasquez had listened in silence, her expression calm and professional, accepting responsibility for her actions without making excuses or attempting to justify her decision. When Webb finished reading the charges, he set the paperwork aside and looked directly at the woman who'd saved 12 American lives. Off the record, Chief Vasquez, that was some of the finest combat flying I've ever witnessed. The after-action reports from Bravo 27 read like something out of a movie. They say you single-handedly destroyed over 30 enemy positions without taking a single hit. Vasquez had nodded slightly, acknowledging the compliment without false modesty. The aircraft performed well, sir. The Taliban fighters were poorly positioned for air defense, and the terrain provided excellent cover for the engagement profile. Her clinical description of the mission completely failed to capture the artistry and courage involved in what she'd accomplished. Webb had leaned back in his chair, studying the woman across from his desk. You understand that I have to take action here. You violated direct orders, took a military aircraft without authorization, and engaged in combat while officially grounded. I can't just ignore that, regardless of the outcome. The silence that followed had stretched for nearly a minute. Finally, Webb had asked the question that had been bothering him since the investigation began. Why did you do it, Elena? You had to know this would end your career. Was saving those SEALs worth throwing away 12 years of exemplary service? Elena Vasquez had considered the question carefully before answering. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the quiet conviction of someone who'd already made peace with the consequences of her actions. Sir, I became a pilot to serve my country and protect American lives. When I heard those men calling for help, when I saw that there was no one else available to answer that call, the choice was simple. My career means nothing if I'm not willing to risk it for the lives of fellow soldiers. Webb had nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in her words. In that moment, he'd made a decision that would surprise everyone involved, including himself. Instead of pursuing court-martial proceedings, he decided to take a different approach entirely. Elena Vasquez had violated regulations, but she'd done so for the right reasons and with extraordinary results. Perhaps there was a way to turn this incident into something positive for everyone involved. The solution Webb proposed was unconventional but brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than face court-martial, Vasquez would accept a formal letter of reprimand for violating flight regulations. In exchange, she would be assigned to a new position that would allow her to share her expertise with other combat aviators while remaining in active service. The Army had been developing a new training program designed to improve close air support operations in mountainous terrain. The program needed experienced instructors who understood both the technical aspects of combat aviation and the emotional pressures of life-or-death missions. Elena Vasquez was uniquely qualified for such a position. Within 6 months, Chief Warrant Officer Elena "Ghost" Vasquez had become one of the Army's most sought-after combat aviation instructors. Her reputation preceded her to every base and training facility, and pilots from across the military branches requested assignment to her courses. The woman who'd once been mocked for her gender had become a legend whose skills were universally respected. The story of Ghost 33 spread far beyond the immediate military community. Aviation magazines wrote feature articles about the mysterious Apache pilot who'd appeared from nowhere to save 12 SEALs. Military historians began documenting the engagement as an example of exceptional combat flying under impossible circumstances. Even civilian media picked up the story, fascinated by the tale of a female pilot whose unauthorized heroism had captured the public imagination. But perhaps the most significant impact was on the young women considering military aviation careers. Alina Vasquez had proven that female pilots could excel in combat roles, not by demanding special consideration, but by demonstrating superior skills and unwavering courage when it mattered most. Her example inspired a new generation of aviators who saw possibility where previous generations had seen only barriers. The 12 Navy SEALs whose lives had been saved that night never forgot their debt to Ghost 33. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who'd recovered fully from his wounds, made it a point to visit Vasquez during one of her training assignments. The meeting had been emotional for both of them, a chance to put faces to voices that had been connected across the darkness of a desperate night in Afghanistan. Morrison had brought with him a gift from his entire team, a custom flight helmet painted with the insignia of SEAL Team 7 and inscribed with the words Guardian Angel. It was a gesture of respect and gratitude that transcended military protocol, recognition from America's elite warriors that Alina Vasquez belonged in their exclusive brotherhood of combat veterans. Years later, when Alina Vasquez retired from active duty as a lieutenant colonel, her legacy was secure. She transformed from a grounded pilot facing the end of her career into one of the military's most respected combat aviation experts. The unauthorized mission that should have destroyed her future had instead become the foundation for a career that inspired countless others. The Apache helicopter she'd flown that night, serial number 405298, was eventually retired from active service and put on display at the Army Aviation Museum. A small plaque beside the aircraft tells the story of Ghost 33, and the night when one pilot's courage made the difference between life and death for 12 American warriors. But the real legacy of Alina Ghost Vasquez lies not in museums or history books, but in the countless aviators she trained and inspired during her career. Her example proved that heroism isn't about following orders or playing by the rules. It's about doing what's right when it matters most, regardless of personal cost. On quiet nights at forward operating bases around the world, pilots still tell the story of Ghost 33. They speak of an Apache that appeared from nowhere, flown by a pilot whose skills seemed almost supernatural, who saved American lives and disappeared back into legend. And somewhere in that story, young aviators find the inspiration to push themselves harder, to be better than they thought possible, to understand that the sky belongs to those brave enough to claim it. The ridge where Alina Vasquez first appeared that night still stands in the mountains of Afghanistan, unchanged by the passage of time. But for those who were there, who heard the sound of salvation approaching through the darkness, it will always be marked by the memory of an Apache climbing over stone and shadow, carrying with it the promise that American warriors are never truly abandoned as long as there are people like Alina Ghost Vasquez willing to risk everything to bring them home.